Okay, this is College Prep English class for homeschoolers at Excellence in Education. Let's share the screen. Okay, and here we go. Got a bunch of things to do. All right. Let's go back and finish this. Okay, we're looking at universal Wi-Fi. Now, the electromagnetic spectrum is indeed, okay.
This may not be a permanent solution, but
Well, as Taylor says when in his segment on duct tape, when it comes down to it, all repair is temporary. So we've got sellotape solving the problem. Good for you.
there we go.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So we've got manifest as here, another plural scientists, and something more incredible like worldwide Wi-Fi coverage. I believe they have it in Belgium, or at least they have nationwide Wi-Fi coverage in Belgium.
That's pretty interesting.
There are, of course, some technical problems with this as creating such a powerful signal. Such as creating such a powerful signal at such a high frequency. So the primary concerns are the fact that we would be exposed to massive amounts of radiation. Well, to what extent is this more than we already have being broadcast through the air all the time? From radio waves and television waves, to the extent that they still exist there, to remote phones and remote controlled dog finders and things like that. I mean, an understanding of the extent to which the electromagnetic spectrum has been occupied, so to speak, is a big question. Now, large chunks of it are reserved by the government for their usage. So, in other words, whenever they do satellite things or spacecraft or so forth, they have chunks of the magnetic spectrum they know nobody else is using. Anyway, interesting question. So if something along the lines of a worldwide Wi-Fi, now notice what you said was is achieved. Do you understand in your ear the difference between is achieved and were to be achieved?
The tense?
Well, the tense is different because this is not really in the same kind of tense at all. This is subjunctive. And I have a section in the book on subjunctive that we haven't really looked at. I think perhaps we should. There are two levels of subjunctive, and basically it's a different way of conjugating your verb in order to convey a certain flavor of meaning. Now, the one that we're working with here is nice and easy to define, and that one is a situation contrary to fact, something that is not the case, but we are speculating about it, in which case we use this subjunctive to using the word were, and it's were for everything. If I were there, if I were to go tomorrow, all of this is speculating about something which is not the case. And as a speaker, you are conveying that impression of not being the case to your listener. I'm saying, if it were she who was there on Saturday, what you're saying is, I know it's not, but we're speculating what would have happened if it had been the case. And so that there's a semantic payload that goes along with the subjunctive. The other subjunctive is used sort of stylistically in a lot of places in English when we say, for example, the decree came down that everyone be able to wear a green hat or something like that. Not that everyone is, but everyone be. And in that case, the word be is used universally. And here it's the word were. We should talk about that at some point, but this is definitely a case where that should be done. Okay, nicely done. The suggestion I made here was that bandwidth is one of the big problems.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction and encryption. With jurisdiction, we're talking about, okay, who's going to control it and how is it going to be controlled, or if it's going to be controlled, and how is it going to be done in such a way that you don't have signals stepping on each other and so forth, which is always a problem. And encryption. Now, you did mention in here at some point security. And of course, security comes down to encryption. That is our method of securing information, preventing it from being adulterated and also surveilled. Now, how does encryption work? Do you know how modern encryption works?
It just broadcasts it in a way where the receiving end can't decode it?
Well, yes, in a very simplified way. You see, traditionally, encryption has always assumed to exist such that the sender and the receiver share some sort of set of rules for encrypting it and decrypting it that nobody else understands. And that would be fine. But the problem is, of course, that that you've somehow got to convey that secret key, so to speak, to the person at the other end.
Yeah.
And that's where it all falls down. Somehow, how am I going to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world and then share a secret key with them? Because if somebody is watching everything we're saying, they would be able to see that as well. And that's really the fundamental difficulty, which has been overcome. And that's the interesting one.
Yeah.
And do you know anything about how that's been done?
Do they just put like a key at the beginning of it?
Well, the thing is,
only
anybody who's watching the communication would presumably see the key. But when we communicate online with a machine that we've never talked to before, and you create a secure channel, it's using a different method. It's not using a secret key. What's happening there is a mathematical algorithm is constructed that allows me to create an encryption-decryption process in which the encryption and decryption are completely independent of each other. They don't use the same key. So I can, for example, create my set of encryption and decryption, and then I can tell everybody in the world, including you, how to encrypt for me without telling anybody how to decrypt it. You see, that way you have two people who can immediately establish secure communication. One of them sends the encryption key to the other one, and that one sends his encryption key this way, and then you can encrypt for each other, but neither of you know how to decrypt what you're encrypting.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's called a trapdoor function or a public key system. And of course, in this country, there's been a lot of controversy about it because the fact is nobody can break it. And of course, government wants to have the key.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the big contentions. Not nice coverage, otherwise, but there's so much more that could be said about this, I think. Okay, I think we will probably, well, I don't know. With Azariah, he may be intending to join us online. let's just make sure that that our broadcast is actually working. Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but I don't see the. There it is. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a viewer too, which is
Probably.
probably ours, right? One viewer.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and do that. And Ezra, if you have a microphone, you can join us, I believe. Exactly what steps you have to go through to do that on Google Plus, I'm not sure, but you're welcome to. Let's go ahead and look at this. Okay, this one is on STEM, and I'm sure you've all heard about STEM or STEAM. What is STEM?
Science, technology, mathematics.
Science,
Or
technology,
engineering,
mathematics. Yeah. And it is a big question and a fascinating one. But it's interesting that this one came up this week, because one of the articles I assigned to you addresses exactly this issue, though it doesn't call it by that name. Which one am I talking about? Maybe we should go and look at the agenda. I have a feeling that the agenda has not been generally read, or at least generally appreciated. Okay, here's our agenda. Oh yes, we were going to have a test today. We don't really have a quorum for doing that test.
Not enough people.
Well, we can talk about it and think about it. It's not as though there's anything really surprising on this test. You will notice, however, that I threw on quite a few more that you haven't seen before. Okay, but you've gone through this already, and you've examined the text. You have located these things in the text. Did anybody have any difficulty doing that?
Not really.
I'd say I did.
I didn't notice the last part. I just noticed that there was extra added on.
Okay, but
Yeah.
really, I just couldn't. I had to give you something new and interesting to think about. I wouldn't want you to get bored just looking at the same old questions again. But the difference between doing things on a machine environment and doing them on paper is just so incredible, so immense, because all you've got to do is bring up the whole play and do a search. And you can find these things. Now, that's why I asked, though, because most of these I did from memory, and so I'm not absolutely sure that I got all of the words exactly spelled the same and so forth. So that's why I'm asking. Okay, but that's not what I came here for. The citation engine, has anybody had a chance to play around with that a little bit?
Oh, I used it actually. I
Great.
didn't add it
Great.
into my essay, but I used it to cite some of my sources.
Citation engine, would that be like easybib.com?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that specific reference. It sounds to me as though it is. Easy bibliography is what it's short for, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's basically the same thing, and it's so universal that there are hundreds of places that do it. This is just the first one I found. It's fairly nice and fairly straightforward. When you're doing a research paper of any sort, you're going to have to put together a bibliography, and you're going to have notes in your text. And so there are three main ways of doing this, at least three main ways that are universally accepted. Well, none of them are universal, apparently. That's because why we have three of them.
Yeah.
But we've got the American Psychological Association, the Modern Language Association, and Chicago. Those are the three styles. And all of them are handled by this citation engine. In fact, once you type your stuff in and get your answer in one of them, you just click it and it'll give it to you in the others as well. And they work just a little bit differently. The one we'll be using is the APA. That's usually what's expected on college papers. And it involves a reference in the text that gives the author's last name and the date and possibly page number, depending on whether it's necessary. And then down at the bottom, you have all of the works listed alphabetically by author, so it makes it nice and easy to look them up. The MLA is similar to that, but the Chicago uses numbers. And so, number 1, number 2, number 3. So go ahead and do that. The important thing is if you find something anywhere that you want, the information you want to use, then go ahead and put a reference together. If it's the URL, very, very simple. You just type the URL into the citation engine. If it's a book, even simpler. Type in the ISBN number and it will look it up for you in books in print. And if it's something else, articles and journals are a little bit harder because there are more things you have to know about those. And the ISSN numbers apparently are not used to do a lookup the way the ISBN numbers are with books. But go ahead and look at those two. It's just a matter of filling out a form, and then it gives it to you and cut and paste it. Okay. Romeo and Juliet. Did I misspell that? Romeo and Juliet?
No.
I think it's correct. It's just the text is
just a little
pixelated.
hard to see. Okay. And the assignments, the citation engine, and how many of you read the Storks Bill?
I did not.
Apparently. Anybody else? Am I giving you enough homework?
When
Yeah.
did you assign that?
Sometime this week. I mean, I sent updated assignments a couple of times this week, partly because my initial updated assignments, for some reason, I had a link in there that was bad, so I updated that anyway. I'm still getting used to this version of Moodle, and I had something in a page in Moodle and found that it didn't work. And so I didn't want you going to a page that didn't work, so I gave another one. So, of course, I had to add something new and interesting to it to justify giving you another one. Okay, the Storks Bill, please go ahead and read that. That's an ancient article of mine, actually. I hope you don't mind. And it explains what this is all about. This is indeed a Storks Bill. And the reason it came to mind is that this is the time of year for them. It's right now they're out there on just any field would be full of them, and so I picked one and brought it in. Later on in the year, these will dry up. They'll ripen, so to speak. They'll dry up, and then each one of these little spears splits apart into 5 little fingers, each of which is attached to a seed, and they fly out. They actually pop and fly out, and once they come out, they look like this thing here, and they twist themselves into a helix, and then that helix wraps and unwraps itself, and the process of doing so plants the seed down into the ground. Sort of drills itself into the ground. It's a fascinating thing. Anyway,
Now, what evolutionists would say that this somehow evolved, but how did it evolve?
this is a good
Because
question.
for something to evolve, there has to be a flaw in the system.
That's a very interesting point. You're talking about taking advantage of accidental. Yes. And indeed, look at the article and see about the conclusions. Indeed, it goes far beyond what this little seed does, but also goes into the mathematics of the seed, which is something I thought you'd all be interested in for the next class, which we're going to, we'll look at some of the mathematics that's involved in this one. However, since none of you have read it, I suspect that we may get to that next week.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I came to this page just a moment ago and got then sidetracked is The Death of Universities by Terry Eagleton. What does he say? I know you've read this one, right? Okay. I apologize for expecting so much. I look at all of your intelligent, enthusiastic faces, and I know that I can't possibly show you something that you're not going to immediately want to jump right into and figure out.
This is inexcusable, guys. We have to pick it up. I'll catch it.
Switch it up a little.
Okay.
I usually get the updates through my email, but I haven't gotten anything. So
I want to show you a little something from Eagleton's article, if you don't mind. I didn't put it in here originally, but let's do that. The End of the Humanities paper. He also did a Notre Dame lecture on it, which I also gave you, but then I changed my mind on that one because the lecture really isn't that audible, and he tends to wander off the subject a bit. So I took that out. But one of the interesting points that he makes here, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here we, he's talking about whether are the humanities about to disappear from our universities? And what was he talking about when he says humanities? He's talking about everything that isn't STEM, right? What's STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay, technology, there are other sort of fuzzy things in between. What are the fuzzy sciences, for example? I'm sure you've come across those. Psychology, sociology, linguistics. There are a number of other sciences there which aren't necessarily the hard sciences. But then we have all of humanities, which is the history of literature and the arts and philosophy and, to some extent, logic. Although logic sort of wanders between mathematics and philosophy. But the point he's making here is just as there cannot be a pub without alcohol, so there cannot be a university without the humanities. If history, philosophy, and so on vanish from academic life, what they leave in their wake may be a technical training facility or a corporate research institute, but it will not be a university. Do you agree with this?
Possibly. Seems like we're eliminating a lot of our thinking and just replacing it with follow these certain guidelines and all that.
To a large extent, that's the point he's making here, certainly, because his contention is that humanities, certainly philosophy and history, give us some perspective on what it is we're doing. And if we are just worried about the technology itself, we're looking at things perhaps with one eye. I don't know whether that metaphor really works particularly well here, but please read this. Who is Terry Eagleton? He's one of the foremost literary critics, and his contention, of course, in here is that criticism is one of the most important aspects of the university and of university education. That is questioning everything when it comes down, and considering all of the different viewpoints on points that are made and contentions, and especially on doctrines and canonical processes and studies. So I think this is an important one to look at, And it bears really rather well on this one here. There's always a trade-off. Or what are we giving up with greater emphasis on STEM?
Mhm.
And indeed, if we increase the science and technology, are we giving short shrift to other things? And that's why I mentioned Eagleton's contention here, that technology without the humanities spells the death of the university, that technology without history, criticism, circumspection, and sagacity, I'm sure you looked all of those up, is sterile and reduces the role of the university to one of support for rapacious industrial exploitation. Would you like to write something refuting this thesis? I don't care which side of the issue you decide to write something on, but it does look like something that deserves to be treated, and it could certainly be fecund turf for writing a research paper of some sort, in case you're looking for something. And also a question here, might it be the case that sustainability has been ill-served by technology in the absence of history and philosophy? There are many more things to write about here. What do you think on that particular one? Is sustainability ill-served by technology?
Oh, I don't know. If we remove technology, then I feel like a lot of people would feel, or they wouldn't know what to do. So
We have ingrained technology so much into our modern existence that its removal is absurd to contemplate.
yeah,
On the other hand, the technology that we've created, specifically fossil fuel exploitation, for example, which is almost impossible to stop. There's an enormous amount of money trying to prevent it from being stopped, trying to persuade people that there's no such thing as global warming. So much more money behind fighting global warming than recognizing it, that we dig a big hole for ourselves in a way. Okay, let's look at this one. The United States of America is usually known for innovation, technology, and power. However, in recent years, now here we've got the acronyms after the spelled out United States, but we don't have one for the United States of America at the beginning. Perhaps we should have done that. Has fallen behind in these categories. Well, when something falls behind, we sort of have to compare what is it falling behind. Presumably, we're talking about other countries, or maybe even the whole European Union or something like that. In these categories, that is development of renewable energy resources, high-speed mass transit, and recovery of natural resources. These are interesting goals to put up there when we're talking about falling behind. Indeed, it's true that we've fallen behind in these particular areas, but that's been a deliberate decision to a large extent. That we are not a signatory to many of the major international ecological accords. And usually when people talk about us falling behind, they talk about we're falling behind in the marketplace, we're falling behind in technology, and we're falling behind in innovation. But this is perhaps much more important that, as Rania mentions here. We're falling behind in renewable energy resources. Indeed, we are. Are we talking about falling behind with STEM or sustainability? Perhaps failures in STEM education have caused the U.S. to fall behind in sustainability technology. That's just a suggestion. I had it in there. Okay. I like the crater here, but I suggested an alternative. Without STEM, the U.S. and many other countries would have a large crater in their economics. Well, perhaps a void, perhaps something missing there. Indeed, we have to fill that. To what extent do we fill it compared, for example, to Asian nations?
not as much.
They do stress
The Chinese stress.
technology. However, they're also acutely aware of the fact that they don't innovate, or that the innovation tends to take place elsewhere is very rapidly copied and emulated in China, for example.
Yeah.
But their school system is even worse than ours when it comes to regurgitating the material that you're given. Here, learn this, and then you feed it back again. That's not education. That's not creativity.
Yeah.
And they are aware of that. It's a tricky thing to address. Okay, something else ran to my mind there that was so important that I lost it. Okay, STEM has the potential, has the possibility, I suggested potential. I think that sounded much better, to allow individuals to design their own ideas and wants. Do you design your wants?
No, want's a verb.
Yeah.
Well, a want
Oh.
can be a noun as well, but it's not something you design usually. It's
Yeah.
something you probably, at least intentionally, design a solution for.
Mhm.
You would satisfy your wants with
Yeah.
something you design rather than designing it. So this is one of the lacks of a form of a lack of clarity that we want to try to adjust when we're writing.
Okay.
It's amazing how a country like China has made such drastic change. It doesn't work. We have to, if you're using a singular noun, the rule is, unless it's an exception, the rule is it needs an article. And so I have to put an A in there. It needs a drastic change, or has made such a drastic change in the past 40 years.
Or such drastic changes.
Right, make it plural,
Mhm.
or find a mass noun for which you don't need an article.
Yeah.
Has produced drastic confusion. We don't have to say a confusion because confusion is a mass noun.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of a mass noun that would satisfy meaning change, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. China 40 years ago was mostly sparse towns. And I explained sparse towns doesn't really describe well the most populous nation on earth. And indeed, it's extremely dense population, but not necessarily technological, of course.
Mhm.
STEM has made billionaires like Bill Gates, Microsoft, Elon Musk, founder of PayPal, and Tesla Motors. When I was your age, everything was on paper. If you needed to look something up, you had to go to the library, and then you really had to know what you were looking for and where you're looking for it. If you wanted to find out where in Romeo and Juliet anybody talks about a butt shaft, how would you do that
Nowadays or back then?
back then?
You'd have to go to the library and
What
Search
would you go to in the library?
encyclopedia.
No,
Dictionary?
I've told you before, actually, what you would go to.
Thesaurus?
Not quite. Concordance. Right.
Concordance.
You'd go to a concordance, and you'd look up the word, and it would tell you everywhere in Shakespeare that word is used. They're less than a picture. It's really astounding how cheap text is. And of course, therefore, you can take all of Shakespeare and search it in a matter of seconds and find anything in there. For that matter, you could take all of the history of literature and search it in a matter of seconds. Okay, nicely done. The emphasis on the importance of STEM. I don't think anybody takes issue with this. Indeed, it's something that we're going to look at a little bit when we look at the programming part of this class. This is what I taught for many years in college. Programming and information technology, and there are all kinds of directions to go there and fascinating things. But the other things that we're leaving out are perhaps just as important. And when we say we've got to focus on STEM, we're leaving out the STEAM, right? But they sometimes put an A in there. So it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Well, the arts, I think, have their point as well, don't you? This may be subject for debate. Perhaps there are those who feel that we really shouldn't have the arts in universities.
We need debates, yes.
What's that?
We do need some debate ideas. And the arts personally is part of society. It's a way to express creativity, to the sharing of ideas.
Mm-hmm. And indeed, poetry can, for example, can be a very powerful device, or literature. The works of Tolstoy and Dickens really had a tremendous effect on our understanding of the class structures and the misery that existed historically, that we wouldn't really see were it not for novels that clarified the life as it existed in various places at various times. Those are just a couple of examples, but it's certainly perfect. Oh, which on the first syllable. I'm trying to think of some of the other examples of that. But we in America have tended to wander off into a different pronunciation and stress the second or the third syllable instead. Things like harassment, harassment, gremlins. You see what I mean? Yeah. Harassment is, there are a number of others there, and I could put together a list of them. I think of it as connectivity, but connectivity, this is an interesting question. And we can look it up. The dictionary is going to give us the answer, and it probably gives us multiple answers. But I'm not going to take time to do it now. You're welcome to do so.
Oh, I have an idea.
Yes.
Can I share some stuff that we can go over next week? It's
Certainly.
Some questions testing logic and reasoning.
Okay. What questions are you thinking of? Why don't you, if you've got something, why don't you post it?
Yeah.
Let us all look at it, and then we can look at it. I have something similar that you might enjoy, and I will put it up there. I'm sure you're all familiar with works of Lewis Carroll. Who's he?
I want to say he's a writer.
Yes, he's a writer.
Yeah, I can't really remember what he wrote though.
Oh my goodness.
I
oh
should know though, probably.
Maybe we should read it next. Alice in Wonderland? Okay. He didn't only write Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, which are my great classics, there's no question about them. But he also wrote a logic text couple of logic texts, and his logic texts are actually funnier than much of his children's narrative. And so I'll bring some of that in if you're interested. What kind of problems were you thinking of?
Just pure reasoning and logic questions you'll find on LSAT exam, stuff
Okay.
like that.
No, that sounds like
I
a
wonder if
wonderful
we can
difficult.
solve them in class.
Well, if you don't post them ahead of time, there's a chance that we're going to waste more class time than we need to trying to solve them.
I'll post them ahead of time.
I think that might be the better way to go. But I think it's a great idea. Are you familiar with, for example, the Lady and the Tiger problems?
No.
Okay, that's sort of a classification of this kind of logic problem, but we're a subset of them. Anyway, we can look at those if you like. All right, where are we here? We are or are not connected. Let's take a quick look. Whereas I can tell everything is working nicely. Okay, and that's the end of humanities. That's something you're all going to be reading twixt now and next week, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you will also be reading about the Stork's Bill here.
Yes.
And I don't suppose if you didn't read that one, you wouldn't have read this one either, right? I was asked for examples of really good articles to read. That's why these are up here.
Yeah.
Both Eagleton and Hitchens, though they tend to throw barbs at each other, they are extremely eloquent barbs, and both of them wield the language just superbly. Here's a collection of other articles by Eagleton. Note the structure and language. Oh, there was supposed to be an illustration there of Eagleton, which has apparently vanished. Okay, and now we'll have Romeo and Juliet. Now, this I know that you've become masters of, experts on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wouldn't say master because, well, to master
200%.
something, you have to invest roughly 10,000 hours.
Okay, well, that's
10,000.
an interesting observation. I think it's a worthwhile one. Yeah, and indeed, in this particular case, so many people have seen the Zeffirelli version, which is wonderful, and I recommend it highly. But I believe, I haven't counted it, but I think the Zeffirelli used maybe about half of the original text. There's an awful lot that's cut out. And when you look at it, you say, okay, yeah, you can cut that out. You won't miss it very much. But there's a lot of other material in there that gives you a little more perspective on the characters and some of the things that are taking place there that are really rather important. Well, things like the balcony. We talked about that last time. This balcony was clearly not accessible from the ground, or we wouldn't have needed the rope ladder. And so Zeffirelli just got rid of the rope ladder so that didn't become a question.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the story, the prince says, "And I too, for winking at your discords, have lost a brace of kinsmen." You know, he only lost one kinsman in the Zeffirelli version because he took out the death of Paris and didn't use that part. So we've got little things like that going on. There's another very important difference, and that is when Juliet has been given the potion by Friar Lawrence. Remain firm and prosperous in this resolve, and tells her to take it when she's going to bed and so forth. And then she looks at this and she says, "This might be poisoned," because Friar Lawrence has, after all, sort of broken the rules by performing a marriage without any parental permission or anything. And he might be just protecting himself from possible retribution, and I mean, that crosses her mind. She doesn't take it seriously, but she realizes that if it doesn't work, she's going to kill herself anyway. So she might as well. There's some very, very heavy weight of decision making on Juliet. And in fact, Juliet is really the tower of strength in this this story, much more so than Romeo, who just sort of was wafted one way or another by the wind of Mercutio and the Tybalt and the Rosalind and Juliet. Juliet, on the other hand, she's resolved. She knows exactly what she wants, and she has absolutely nobody to go to. Her new nurses abandoned her. But the nurse was on her side, helped her out with arranging the marriage and everything else. But then the nurse turns on her. And so she's utterly on her own. She goes to Karl Marx. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Oh, where are we? Here we are. Okay. Where shall we pick it up from? We did get to the balcony scene. And we've laid some of the foundations there. We know what happened at the party. Of course, Zeffirelli did it a little differently than the book does, than the original play does. What is the major difference there at the party between Zeffirelli's description of it and Shakespeare's description of it? Shakespeare makes it very clear that Romeo does not dance. Zeffirelli cuts it out, and Romeo's out there on the dance floor, and that's where he meets Juliet. There's quite a distinction there, because okay, and then we have the meeting between them, and then he seeks out and finds this orchard and talks to Juliet in the window. And of course, in the Zeffirelli version, there's a convenient tree there, and he climbs up to it. Then what happens after? First of all, what conclusion do they come to during that meeting? Well, they decide, of course, there's this mutual exchange of vow which is taking place. Now that's fine. But then at the end, she says, if you, let's find it. Let's find it.
No.
Okay, 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee, where and what time thou wilt perform the rite. And all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. Okay, so what have they decided to do?
Thought so. I knew it. Getting married.
Yes, and he's going to be arranging it. But it's interesting also that having decided that she's going to send someone to Romeo to carry a message back and forth, they do eventually determine when to send. They don't bother to say where. That's an interesting one. And where does Juliet find Romeo? Out on the streets. So it's not as though it went to his home. It wouldn't be easy to go there after all. Where to send the nurse. They don't even bother to figure out where. Okay, and so we have this wonderful part at the end with parting is such sweet sorrow and so forth. At what o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee? At the hour of 9 I will not fail. 'Tis almost morning, I would have thee gone. And then sleep well upon thine eyes, peace in thy breast. Okay, so they depart, or Romeo departs. They part, and where does Romeo go? You know this. You've seen it. How many times have you watched it? Has anybody watched it less than 5 times?
Yeah, less than 5.
Ooh. It's worth it. Trust me. But don't watch the same one. Watch a different one. I've got 2 of them up there. You can find 3 or 4 of different vintages. You can even watch the ones I told you not to watch. Which one did I tell you not to watch?
Zipper really, which is
The
completely appropriate, I think.
the gang version one.
The
Wait,
gang
yeah.
version one, the
Yeah.
Baz Luhrmann version.
Oh wait, no.
And the only reason I say that is because they deliberately made it edgy in introducing drug culture and transvestitism and all kinds of things in there, which are unnecessary. Let's put it that way. It's certainly not justified in the text. Okay, so where are we now? After he leaves, where does he go? Well, he wants to marry her. What does he need to do in order to have that happen?
He needs to get a priest.
Right, he needs to go to priest. So he goes to Friar Lawrence. So Friar Lawrence, we need to know something about him because he's an important person. And we learn a great deal about him simply from this little soliloquy that he is giving us at the beginning of this scene. The gray-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light, and fleckless darkness like a drunkard reels from the 4th day's path, and tightens fiery wheels. Just wonderful language, totally thrown away in the Zeffirelli version and so many other versions. We have so many more words in the text that were actually used there. And so he's talking about the in general, the sun and the wonderful array of weeds and flowers, the earth that nature's mother is her tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. And from her womb, children of divers kinds we sucking on her natural bosom find. Many and yet different. What he's talking about here? Talking about the soil. We're talking about herbs. It's talking about the bounty of the countryside and how all of these herbs have their qualities. Some of them for good, some of them for bad, and they're all different in one way or another. And he's an expert on it, or at least we have to assume that he's an expert on it. He studied it. Of course, that's a dangerous thing to do, especially for a woman. Why?
To study herbs or just study in general?
Studying herbs. It's been estimated that several million women were burned as witches for simply that kind of study.
That's true.
Do you believe in witchcraft?
Well, the question is, why were they burned? And what is witchcraft? Indeed, what Friar Lawrence does here is witchcraft, isn't it? She dies and comes back to life.
True.
You see what I mean? That's the kind of technology, if you'd like. That's the kind of STEM we were talking about back there.
I don't believe in coming back to life from witchcraft.
Well, you see what happened in the story, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he talks about the virtues of all these plants, and this gives us a background to him, and it gives us a little bit of an understanding of how and why he managed to come with that solution for Juliet. It gives we need to see that, and then within this whole medicine. Indeed, there are so many poisons that are also medicines. Digitalis, for example. What is digitalis? It's the foxglove flower,
Oh.
and it's used as a heart medicine.
Yeah. It can also cause heart attacks if ingested, right?
Very good. Exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, and then for this being smelt with that part, cheers each part. Being tasted, slays all senses with the heart. Two such opposed kings encamp them still, in man as well as herbs, grace and rude will. And he draws here a simile between the actions of different herbs and the good and bad in humanity. Okay. That whole, it's a wonderful thing, but it doesn't really help the plot a lot and is so often left out. Okay, and enter Romeo. Good morrow, Father. Benedict. And we know he's a Benedict. No, is he a Benedictine monk? No, he's a Franciscan monk. If we look further on, we discover that he indeed is Holy Saint Francis. What early tongues so sweet saluted me? Young head to bid, to so soon to bid good morrow to thy bed. Care keeps his watch in every old man's eye, and where care lodges, sleep will never lie. It's cut out, of course. But where unbruised youth with unstopped brain couch his limbs, there golden sleep doth reign. Therefore, thy earliness doth me. Thou art uproused with some distemperature. Or if not so, then here I hit it right. Our Romeo hath not been in bed tonight. Okay, that of course is in there, and that's important. Okay, so what happens here in this scene? We'll see it. Go through it step by step. Well, what does Romeo want?
To meet Rosalind?
No.
Oh.
Wrong girl.
Oh,
that's the sort of
Juliet.
thing that can get a lover in a lot of trouble. Okay, so it's not Rosalind. No, it said, Romeo said, the last is true, the sweeter rest was mine. God pardon sin, wast thou with Rosaline?
Ah.
With Rosaline? My ghostly father, no, I have forgot that name, and that name is woe.
Mm.
Okay, that's good, my son, but where hast thou been? I'll tell it thee ere thou ask it me again. Romeo is wandering around the subject, and he's not coming to the point. And this is interesting. I had been feasting with my enemy, where on a sudden one hath wounded me. That's finely wounded, both our remedies within thy help and holy physic lies. I bear no hatred, blessed man, for lo, my intercession likewise steads my throne. What is he talking about? Well, Friar doesn't know either. But he is talking about feasting with his enemy. And they are both wounded, and they're both wounded in a way that he, the friar, can heal. So what is he talking about there? They've fallen in love, they want to get married.
Yeah.
Very good. Sorry, I should have waited for you on that one. Okay, so Friar Lawrence is baffled by all of this and said, be plain, good son, and homely in thy drift. Riddling confession finds but riddling shrift. Okay, so Romeo comes down to it, says, then plainly know My heart's dear love is set on fair daughter of rich Capulet. As mine on hers, so hers is set on mine. And all combine save what thou must combine by holy marriage. When and where and how we met and wooed and made exchange of vow, I'll tell thee as we pass. But this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. Notice this wonderful iambic pentameter tumbling along, nicely rhymed. It's rhymed all the way through. Set, Capulet, mine combine, how, vow, pray today. Okay. And what is this Franciscan monk's response? Oh, what a change is here. Okay, well, he's been listening to confessions from Romeo about his moping about Rosalind. He obviously knows all about it. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly, bang, he's off, wants to marry somebody else. And so his response is understandable. His response is circumspect and mature, and that's not what Romeo and Juliet are. They're not circumspect and mature at this point. Okay. Is Rosalind that thou didst love so dear so soon forsaken? Young men's love then lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes. Jesu Maria, what a deal of that's what it means by it. What a deal of brine hath washed thy sallow cheeks for Rosaline. You've been lacrimating all over for Rosaline, and suddenly, what is lacrimating?
Lusting or wishing that you were with her?
Tearing, or literally weeping, but tearing, yes. How much salt water thrown away in waste to season love that of it doth not taste. Okay, and now he goes on with this wonderful language, which we don't hear, at least in most cases. Okay, the sun is aside from heaven clears, the old groans ring yet in mine ancient ears. He can still hear Romeo whining for Rosaline. Mm-hmm. Lo, here upon thy cheek the stain doth sit of an old tear that is not washed off yet. If e'er thou wast thyself in these woes thine, and these woes were all for Rosaline. And art thou changed? Pronounce this sentence then. Women may fall when there's no strength in men. Thou chidst me off for loving Rosaline. What is this wonderful verb here? It's past tense. It's an irregular verb. There are only about 130 irregular verbs in our language. And some of them we've sort of lost track of. Chide and chid being one of them. Mm-hmm. Chit and chat being one we don't keep the last past tense of very well. We have a number of others. The cock crew yesterday. Today I shoe myself, yesterday I shod myself. He is clothed, no, he's clad in. Okay, there are a number of ancient verbs that have their past tenses. Remember those, because use an irregular archaic past tense once in a while at home and just see what your family responds with. Okay, thou chidst me off for loving Rosaline. To chide, to upbraid, if you'd like, to castigate, to disparage. You getting all these words?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember chide and chid. It's a good one. Mm-hmm. For doting, not for loving, and badst me bury love. Past tense of to bid. He bids him do something, he bade him do something. And it's spelled B-A-D-E, just to confuse you with the pronunciation. Love. Not in a grave to lay one in and out, another out to have. So Romeo said, I pray thee, chide not. She whom I love now doth grace for grace, and love for love allow. The other did not so. In other words, Juliet is not running out of time, are we? No. Requiting his love, another useful word to remember. Okay, so he is still skeptical, but he's got an interesting point here. After all, Friar Lawrence is a dedicated man of God, and he's a man of peace. And what would he like to see?
The two families to stop fighting each other.
Absolutely, reconciliation between the two warring families. And so he says, oh, she knew well thy love did read my rote that could not spell. But come, young waverer, come go with me. In one respect I'll thy assistant be. For this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor to pure love. Notice that prove rhymes with love. Doesn't rhyme with it now, but the pronunciation in Shakespeare's time was actually quite different, and almost certainly did back then. In fact, there are a number of rhymes that we can prove existed back then, and a number of puns that appear in the text that are only understandable if you pronounce them in the original Shakespearean. For example, at the beginning we have, from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, to start cross lovers take their lives. Loins, of course, is the way it's generally appreciated and understood, but it's exactly the same pronunciation as the word lines would have had at the time. So we're talking about the lines of the text, the lines of the poem. Okay, now Romeo says, let us hence, I stand on sudden haste. Well, he's in a hurry. He's just met this girl and he wants to marry her tomorrow. So Prior says, wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. Okay. Okay, so now we jump on to the next scene here. Tell me what happens in this scene. Okay, who's here? We've got Benvolio, Romeo's cousin, and Mercutio. Who's Mercutio? We know him well. The two major places where we know Mercutio. Clearly, Mercutio goes on about Queen Mab in the Queen Mab speech, and is brought down to earth by Romeo before they go to the party. Now, why that speech is there, it's a little hard to tell, but it's an interesting one, and was left in by Zeffirelli, for example. But we also know that Mercutio and Romeo are close. Mercutio is a bit slighted when Romeo gives them the slip after the party. Romeo goes off to see Juliet. But he's also, when Mercutio is shouting out for him, Romeo! And Zeffirelli does a wonderful thing with that, because when Mercutio is shouting Romeo, Juliet hears it. Remember that scene? It's an interesting thing that's happening on there. She hears herself being called from one direction, I understand, not the other direction. She hears the name Romeo being called on the street. And so Benvolio and Romeo are here. Where the devil should this Romeo be? Came he not home tonight? Not to his father's. I spoke with his man. Who is Romeo's man? It's in the Dramatis Personae. Balthazar is the name of Romeo's servant. Yeah. And we encounter him later on. In fact, his presence has a lot to do with the way the plot unfolds. And then Mercutio said, "Ah, that same pale, hard-hearted wench, that Rosaline, torments him so that he will sure run mad." Okay, well, tells us that Mercutio was indeed a confidant of Romeo. Romeo shared with Mercutio what was going on in his head. And Mercutio feels for him and also is concerned for him. Then Benvolio drops the brick here. He says, "Tybalt, the kinsman of old Capulet, hath sent a letter to his father's house. A challenge on my life." Seems like a really dangerous thing to do. Think about it. The prince has forbidden fighting on the streets and has warned both Capulet and Montague that their lives will pay the forfeit of the peace. And Tybalt writes a challenge down and sends it to Romeo. What if that were simply to be taken to the prince? Well, there are all kinds of places in this story in which "if only" pops up. Just said, if only this, if only that, it would have worked out differently. But of course, that's not the way it works. Yeah, we have that Greek tragic ending that is so inevitable, and we see these portents that tell us that it's coming. And Mercutio, "A challenge? Romeo will answer it." And Mercutio responds, "Well, any man that can write may answer a letter. Nay, he will answer the letter's master. How he dares being dared." And indeed, it would. This dare really is what would be in the challenge. We only know that from what they're saying here. "Alas, poor Romeo, he is already dead. Stabbed with a white wench's black eye, shot through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft with the blind boy's butt shaft." There's your butt shaft, by the way. "And is he a man to encounter Tybalt?" Okay, in other words, Romeo's not up for a duel. Romeo is comatose in love is basically the assumption that Mercutio is making there. To encounter Tybalt. Why? What is Tybalt? And Mercutio goes on and explains. Tybalt is a duelist. Tybalt has a reputation. He doesn't say anything here about how many he has slain, but he certainly implies that it has been the case. "Keeps time, distance, and proportion, rests me his minim rests 1, 2, and the third in your bosom. The very butcher of a silk button. A duelist. Okay, what's a minim, by the way? Any musicians in here? Okay, we've got our whole note, half note, quarter notes. This is what we call them in this country. In England, they still go by crotchets and quavers and semiquavers and minims. And indeed, a minim is, I believe the minim rest is a whole note rest.
I'm not familiar with that term, minim.
Right. It does exist, however. You can look it up. And all of the others, the crotchets and the quavers, stand for the quarter notes and eighth notes. Okay, so they discuss this. This is a commentary on current tendency to wander off into French, for example. But indeed, he Romeo does this right there. Okay. He's talking about these strange flies, these fashionmongers, these pardonnez-mois who stand so much on the new form that they cannot sit at ease in the old bench. Oh, they're bons. Like he's talking about the French, and this reference has to do with some affectation. That here comes Romeo. Okay, and now this bit here, I'll let you folks figure it out. We're running over a little bit here. This we see just a little bit of it happening in the Zeffirelli version. There's more of it here in the text. And what's really going on here is we understand the relationship between Romeo and Mercutio. Romeo holds his own in a sort of a witty interchange that becomes terribly bawdy and priapic. Look that one up if you'd like. I will translate it for you. And we get a sort of locker room humor, but it's a high level of locker room humor. There's a good deal of clever word usage here, which indicates and reflects the level of education that the gentry, the noble houses would have in comparison, for example, to that which we see between the servants in the very first act. Okay, and so Romeo says, "But pardon, good Mercutio, my business was great, and in such a case as mine, a man may strain courtesy." He dashed off and gave the slip the night before. So, okay, so they go through a good deal of bawdy and prurient and salacious interchange here. It's amazing how you can address these subjects without getting in trouble if you have the adequate vocabulary for it. You can look those up if you'd like to. Okay, so then what happens, we will pick it up here next time, I suppose. We have the nurse coming in. And of course, this is Juliet's emissary, Juliet's messenger. The nurse is coming to talk to Romeo. And you all know exactly what happens there, but sort of next time. Any questions about this? You all understand it thoroughly, right?
I'll be watching it a couple more times over the week.
Yeah, it is a wonderful play. It really is worth studying.
Oh,
yes.
Speaking of watching, has everyone seen Downton Abbey?
Yeah.
I really haven't seen much of it. Would you recommend
From
it?
season 1, yes. It's PBS's best program that they've been working on.
Really? Okay. Because I remember seeing all of the Forsyte saga and Upstairs, Downstairs, and the Pallisers, which were all the same kind of thing. But I just never got into Downton Abbey. Would you indeed recommend it?
Yes, I recommend it. I'm watching season 5 right now with my family, but season 6 is out. But started from season 1.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Okay, well,
Yeah, they generally
I
use decent
appreciate the endorsement. I tell you the truth, I've been deliberately avoiding it. I don't need more on my plate of things to watch and follow, but I will do that if you think it's worth it.
Yes.
The big question, of course, I've asked you already is, do you have enough homework?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
I would like to have another debate.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
We could think about debate topics now, or we can post something. One, two.
Yeah.
I mean, we've
Oh,
hit so many
yeah.
things in our discussion today.
Yeah.
Is for example, an appreciation and a reverence for STEM, is that equivalent to a reluctance and perhaps a willingness to discard the humanities? And should we indeed be doing that? Humanities include a number of other things besides history, but for example, languages and cultures. This is something we in the United States are abysmally ignorant about. Most of us, including the president, can't find most of the countries in the world. And we may be blowing them up, but we don't even know what borders them. It's a dreadful lack of understanding. And yet one of the things that I've given you already, and would be happy to give you more if you'd like, is information from people who really do understand these things. One of my favorite journalists, Robert Fisk, for example, who's been an expert on the Middle East, speaks all the languages. And this is what makes a good journalist, who understands what's really going on in the world. And yet the journalism that we see is just very simplified and very skewed, if you'd like. And so I don't know. Do you need some more homework? I can give you some. I see these heads shaking here. Okay, well, I know you're not going to be able to resist going through and reading all of the articles that I've given you to read and critiquing them.
Okay.
After all, I've been telling you what is wrong with your articles, with your papers, and I was asked then, well, what's an example of some really good ones? Terry Eagleton's stuff is absolutely wonderful. Hitchens writes amazing, or wrote amazing material. There are a number of others whose output is just sterling and wonderful to emulate. So read at least the 3 that I've given you. I'm sorry, one of those is mine. I apologize for that, but go ahead and critique it. Note that one was written 35 years ago.
Wow.
But still, tell me what you think, and maybe you'll find in there some subjects for debate that we'd like to look at. Okay?
Okay.
Have a wonderful week. I'm just going to go ahead and do some programming
I
today.
can't do that today.
You
I have
can.
to be somewhere.
I probably could.
I'm busy.
Okay, and you're what?
Oh, I probably could, but
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just, maybe we'll make it a little shorter to see how it goes.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, again, I don't have a computer. so-
I've got it all set up here.
Okay.
Okay, now, did you get a chance last time to follow along, and have you installed Python?
I know I haven't installed it. Yet again, I'm not sure how it works on Macs.
All you have to do is go to python.org, and then where it says Mac, go ahead.
Okay.
You have to download the appropriate one. I don't know exactly how it will work either, but it runs on everything, and it should function exactly as this one does. I question whether I should stop the. I suppose I should let this go on if. I wonder who the viewers are. There must be a way that I can find that out, but I don't know how it is, how to do it.
Yeah, it probably does.
Oh well, let's go ahead and I'll just show you a couple of things that I put together here.
All right.
I have a feeling if I switch over here that I'm going to have to switch my my screen over to this screen, and that still probably isn't going to work. So it may not. So what I'm going to do here is stop the screen sharing.
Mhm.
And then go over to the computer class and start screen sharing again. I believe that's it right there. So start screen sharing. Okay, here we are in our computer classroom. And now what you're going to have to do is go into here, installing Python. And what the only real choice that you'll have to make here is but we are using Python 3. I did that arbitrarily. It turns out that there's an immense wealth of literature programs written in Python 2, and those are not compatible with the jump to Python 3. And so a lot of people continue to use Python 2, understandably. But since we're starting from scratch, I figured, well, let's go ahead and start with Python 3. And so I want to make sure you get that rather than Python 2. There are some differences. Okay, so you go to the Python page and download the right version for your machine. Let's just go there and take a look. And notice that it's python.org, nice and easy, and they give you an example of a Python program here and talk about functions. What we want is downloads, and what we want is Mac OS X, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you would go in there, and let's notice that they've got the version 2 and 3, and so we simply want to choose 3.
Okay.
Okay, and the installation should be very simple. It's a very straightforward process.
Mhm.
Okay, now I ended up opening that instead of in a new tab. Let's make sure that we're still looking at. There we go. Oh, no, we're back to Shakespeare. Okay. So I showed you a couple of things last time, and you're welcome to look at those. But what we're going to do, I'm going to start my idle. Now, idle is what we're going to be running. It is Python. What it is the intelligent Python editor and interactive Python. We can just go ahead and tell it to do things right away, and it does them right away. And so I'm going to start running that one and bring it up here. And I want to show you how to take programs out of our, this is what idle will look like. It's a white screen. It'll say this stuff on the top. And remember what we were doing last week? If I type something in here, you know, something like that. 2 + 4 is 6. Okay, but I can make those expressions as long and as complex as I need to, with all kinds of. If I use the mathematics library with all kinds of trig functions and exponentiation, anything you want, I can make a formula, an expression, and it will evaluate it. Okay, but what we need to do here, in order to use the programs that I have handed out to you, what I've done this last week is I've written a number of programs. Now, these programs are over your head, but not very over your head. Give it a week or two, and you'll have some sort of an idea what they are. We started out with conversions. That was from last week. And then I wrote the rest of these this last week in order to demonstrate. We've got the tree with leaves, for example, up there, and some function plotting. Now, Dawson, where do you stand right now on pre-calc? Have you taken pre-calc?
Gosh, I can't remember what I'm on. Currently.
Have you done any calculus at all?
Might have.
How
Can't
about
remember.
trig?
I don't think so.
Okay. In that case, you just give me an idea of where to start. This is not bad. I'm just wondering how much background you might have had.
Right, okay.
We can solve those problems. So what I want to do here is show you how to take a program and bring it into your machine and run it. So I'm going to open this programming example here. And this is actually, I threw in a picture of the output of this program so that you could see what it would be doing, and we can expand on that and do various things with it. Now, exactly what's going on here, Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But what we need to do though is to grab it. There we go. And just select it all and copy it into the clipboard. And then we go back to our where is it? I opened up. There we go. There we are. Here I'm going to go to File, New File, and then Edit, Paste. And this will take the program that I handed out to you and bring it up in this editor. Now we just have to save that. So now I do File, Save As, and we give it some sort of intelligent name. Now, when you do this, it will take you to your Python 3.4 directory, which will have been created when you install Python. But that's probably not where you want to put things. So make a subdirectory in there. What I've done is created a subdirectory called class progs, and then put things inside of that. And so in this case, I'll give this a silly name. And .py is the extension you want to put on it.
Okay.
That simply stores it in a way so that if you are in the operating system and you simply point at that file and click on it, at least in Windows, this will happen, I assume, in your system as well, your operating system knows what it is, it knows it's a Python program, and will run it, completely independent of this environment. So you can write a program and it becomes one more program that's stored on your disk, which you can run whenever you like. So I'm going to go ahead and save this in that directory. Now let's go ahead and run it. Now, exactly what it's doing here, I've explained step by step every single line. The part in red here, whenever you see that hatch mark there, the sharp sign, it means that everything after that on the line is ignored by Python, and it's simply explanation for humans to understand what's going on. And so you'll notice that all of these red things explain everything that's actually happening. Here's the leaf is being drawn. Here's the twig is being drawn. And here's the main program itself. That tells us how big the limb is going to be and how big the twig is going to be relative to the size of the limb, and telling us when to stop. Because one of the things that's happening in here is twig is what's called a recursive function. What twig does is it draws a line, and then it goes up, let's see, then it points itself to the left and says, draw a twig here. And then it points itself to the right and says, draw a twig here, and then it returns. That's it. And so what happens is I say, draw a twig here, and it goes up there. And then it says, draw a twig there, draw a twig there. And then each one of those twigs goes off and says, draw a twig there, draw a twig there. So what I have is a twig which calls itself, and it says, okay, I'm twigging, go ahead and twig in that direction. And then it keeps on going. It would go indefinitely. But for the fact that I put something in here saying, when you get to a twig that's only this big, stop and put a leaf on it.
Right.
Okay. So let's take a look and see how this works. We're running. Now, to run the program in the editor, as you know, as I told you, if you put it on the desk, your desktop or your disk, and then just click on it, it will run. But here in the editor, we go up to the run and say run module. And it will go up there, and it's creating this. Every time it finishes a twig, it comes back again and continues to twigify. So you see how that one little program calling itself over and over again goes off and makes this tree. That makes sense. Sort of a neat idea, don't you think?
Yeah, it is.
So anyway, that's one of the things one can do, and what we're doing it with here is called turtle graphics. And much of this can just be done by looking at the beginning of this thing here and just cutting and pasting stuff right out of it. Screen equals turtle.screen. Just stick that in your program. You don't need to worry about what it is. Screen title, tree and leaves with turtle graphics. Well, if you noticed it, the screen had that title in the blue up at the top of it when we ran it. And then we decide things like, this is the size of the limb to begin with. This is how big the smaller limbs are going to be relative to the size of the big one. And this is how, where you're going to stop. When they get this small, don't go any further. And so I'm just establishing values there. And then turtle.turtle is the little object, is what they call it, the little thing that draws things. And I'm calling it T just to make it easy to refer to, because that way I don't have to type in the word turtle.turtle every time. I just type in the word T. And by putting a dot after it, I can do all of the kinds of things that it knows how to do. Now, Python is very nice about this. I tell it to tell me what I can do with T. I do that by dir T. It'll give me a list of all the different things T knows how to do. Well, among other things it knows how to do are pen up, which means don't draw. T.home means go to the middle of the screen facing right. I don't know why they decided to do facing right, but always facing right. And then decides on the size of the tree. In other words, the thickness of the twigs. That's the 3 there. Pen size. And pen color, brown. And then turn to the left 90 degrees. This points it up on the screen. And then I'm backing down, so I started towards the bottom of the screen, give me more space. Put the pen down, set the speed, and you can slow it down if you want. And then it's calling twig. It's saying, make a twig here. I'm telling it what the name of the turtle is, that's T. The size of the limb, that's limb size. The proportion, that's prop. And the final size. Actually, that I had stop equals 8. I should have put stop in here, set 10. Yeah. Call twig, passing size, proportional, final size. And that just calls twig, and that draws the whole tree right there. And then this part bit at the end, this is just a way of saying, wait for the user to say he's done. And you do that by pushing the enter key.
Okay.
Okay. And so the rest of it is all taking place up here. Now, what I did last week was just do a number of things right here in our main sequence. But what we're doing here is defining these little functions, is what they're called. Twig is a function and leaf is a function. And when I refer down here to twig or leaf, what it means is that the program, Python, will go off and run that function. And then when it hits the end of the function, which usually looks a lot like this, return, then it comes back again to where it came from. Okay, so leaf is a nice and simple one. It simply says pen color green, begin filling the area, create a circle, and then fill it full of green. Then change the pen color back to brown and come back again. Very straightforward. Twig is a little trickier because twig says if the size of the twig is less than stop, where stop is the size we want to stop at, then call leaf and return. Otherwise, go forward the distance we're supposed to go, turn to the right, and then twig again. And turn to the left 90 degrees, 45 degrees to the right, and then 90 degrees to the left. That points in the two directions. And then twig again, and then turn back, point straight forward, and go backwards again, and return. Okay, so this part here, of course, goes over and over again with twig calling twig as it goes out. Well, let's just look at it again. Now, you realize, of course, I didn't just sit down and write this from beginning to end and have it work the first time. It takes a lot of fussing and trying to figure out what went wrong, why isn't it doing it the way I'd like it to do, why is that a different color than that one? You see what I mean?
Right.
But that's what writing programs is all about. It's trying to figure out the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any questions?
No.
Great. Let me just show you what I was going to show the others and what we'll go over next week. We'll certainly be doing this next week
Okay.
if the others can manage to join us. Azariah was going to join us today. That's why I continued to leave the thing on. Okay, in order to stop this, however, I have to go back here and push the enter key. That's what I had up here. It's waiting for the enter key to be put. Once that's the case, I can go ahead and close this. And we're back here in the shell again. Okay, now we have found this one and called it silly name. I've got a couple of others. Here's a question. Would you like to try to take another thing off of the web page and save it? Maybe that's the wrong tool to give you. Can you figure out how to use that? That's going to be a little hard. I'm sorry.
Kind of.
You know what I should do is get the mouse.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
And the trigger is the mouse button.
Right.
If this is too tricky, I'll get a mouse out.
We built this.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that this gadget is going to be so tricky. My thought was, I just want to go through the process and show you how, make sure that you know how to take one of my handout programs onto your machine and save it as a file.
Okay.
Okay, so what we want to do here in the Python shell is go to File. No, not that file, the file inside the Python shell.
Oh,
This right there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So File, you pull the trigger.
Oh, sure.
There we go. New file. Okay. Now let's go into the classroom. We'll have to, yeah, down there. You'll have to hit the Firefox. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, the second one in there, the programming example. Okay, actually, we're inside that last programming example here. So hit the tab. I'll do it too. You're not going to lose any value out of that. Okay, so I'm hitting that tab. Now what we want to do is find one of these programs that we want to run. Why don't we use this one here? Function plotter with multiple functions. So you go ahead, and if you can just go ahead and push the trigger on it, and it'll open that one up.
Okay.
Okay, now you want to select all of the contents of this page. So put your cursor up at the beginning where it says function plotter. Not there. We want that's the title over there. So we want the contents, not the title. So we'll start right here.
So
Right, and then just keep going down. Okay, now go back up. That's it. Right, we don't want the last modified at the bottom. I did that earlier today, and it stops on it and says, "What's this syntax error?" So anyway, okay, now edit and copy. Now we can do that with a right click, or you can go up to the edit up here. Copy. There we go. Okay, good. Now let's switch over to the Python screen, wherever it is. No, the Python screen. This is going to be at the bottom of the screen.
oh, okay.
It's one of these, and I can't remember which one you just opened. That's not it. That's not it. Probably the right-hand one. That's not it. That's not it. That's the main one.
Okay.
That's not it. We have two of those. That's not it. Last one. There we go. Okay, now edit, paste. You see the edit up there? Yeah, there we go. Paste. Okay, good. Now simply file, save as. Save as, keep going down. Yeah. Okay, now it'd be better if we put these inside of class programs, whatever directory you've decided to make for yourself. The one that I made was this one here, class progs. So I'm just gonna double click and go in there. Now we just type in any kind of silly name that doesn't already exist.
Okay.
Except for silly name, because that one does exist.
All right.
How about chid? It's the past tense of chide.
Okay.
Okay, so they type it in and they put a .py after it.
Guessing I.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Of course okay. Okay. Now you put save. Very good. Now go ahead and run it.
Where do I do that again?
You look up at the top of the screen and you choose run.
There it is.
And run module. Okay, that's running it. Okay. Okay, even better. So do you have any idea what we're looking at there?
Kind of.
I'm sorry?
Well, somehow we made these lines.
I'm sorry?
Somehow we made it make those lines.
Well, we are drawing, yes, but what is it that's being drawn up there? Do you have any idea what that is?
No.
Okay, let me explain that, because this is something really crucial when it comes to mathematics. What we're looking at here is often called a Cartesian plane or an XY plane. And it's really the most important tool in all of mathematics. That's probably saying a lot, but it's really rather true. It was developed a little bit after Romeo and Juliet was written.
Okay.
And this tool is a wonderful way to represent values and the relationship between values. And what we're talking about there is a function. So for example, let me have the device there. I'm going to make a couple of other little things here and change this program and show you some of the things that can be done with it. This we'll be doing next week anyway, so or if there's interest, we'll have to see how it works. Okay. All right. So what I want to do here is I'm going to find this chid over here, and I'm going to make some little changes in the program itself. And first, by putting this little thing in front of it, I'm saying ignore this. So I'm turning off two of those functions. No, I don't need to turn that one off. I'll turn this one off. I'm just going to have one function being plotted there. And then that one we can mess around with. This one is going to be pen color red. And this is going to be passing in function 1. And so this is going to be plotting function 1. So I'm going to go up here, and here's function 1. Well, originally what I was doing was taking the sign of x, which is not important for you to understand. But what that is a function. In other words, I'm taking what this tool is good for is we have a value that we give to x, and that value x is going across the screen that way. And the value that we're giving to x is simply going to march from the left side of the screen to the right. But as we do it, we take some sort of function of that value, and that determines how high and how low we're going to go as we go across the screen. And that function could be anything. If, for example, I say the function of x is, I'm returning this value when I want to call it, is simply going to be x. The function of x is x. Okay. In other words, whenever x is 1, y is 1. Whenever x is 2, y is 2. And so y is going to be exactly the same value as x all the way through. So if I run it here, oops, this isn't my intent. If I run it, save it. That's it. One must realize that our x-axis and our y-axis are not using exactly the same gradation sign. But you see there, we just have a line going straight up.
Okay.
Okay. And so, let's see where we are here. Tell it to stop. And go back to our program. Okay, so that's what happens if we just we say y is the same as x. And so in this case, suppose I were to do this. Can you guess what it's going to do when I say return negative x?
It's going to change the movement of the red line.
It's going to what?
I was going to change the movement of the red
Yeah,
line.
it's going to change it. So instead of doing that, it's going to do that, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things I can do is let's just go ahead and leave that one return x, and then I'm going to take my second function and make it work. And by saying negative x, I'm going to deploy the second one, which means that down here I have to say, go ahead and run the second function. And here's the second function.
All right.
I need to get rid of that. Okay. Now, if we run this, we should see both of them. Did I goof up somehow? I'm not sure what happened there. I was expecting to see the other one come on. But that's part of the problem with running things when you have it. Oh, here we have, I go back to my shell screen here, and it says name Y is not defined. Line 27 in function 2, return. I typed it in wrong. Okay, you see, this is what one spends a lot of time doing whenever whenever one's writing a program, is you make mistakes, and you have to figure out what they are and try to fix them. So in this case, the one function ran fine, the second function did not, because I typed it in wrong. And in fact, I think I said it right. I just didn't type it in wrong. I put in negative y instead of negative x, which of course is not what it should be doing. It should be negative x. So now let's try it. Okay. There it goes. Okay. Right. So now we go in both directions. Now, so we can do anything we want with these functions and give it any kind of function. In my classes, I used to ask, "What is your favorite function?" Well, not everyone has a favorite function, but when we're talking mathematical functions, there are a lot of interesting ones that can be thrown up there. One of them, of course, that becomes very important in math is this one. I'm going to leave that x up there, but this one I'm going to put in change this a little bit. And very, very simply, I'm going to type x. Boy, it never gives up, does it?
No, no.
I'm going to say x times x. So before I had y equals x. So when x is 1, y is 1. When x is 2, y is 2. But now it's going to be different. What is x times x when x is 1?
It's going to be 1.
Right.
So,
what is x times x when x is 2?
4x.
Right. And when x is 3?
It's going to be 9x.
Right. So what's it going to look like?
Very different.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Let's go ahead and see what it does. Okay, so it's going to draw the same old one that we had before. And now it's going to go something else. There it goes. Now that is the function of what we call a quadratic. That is something that is squared, something multiplied by itself. I want to take us to one of the other programs that I have written here. Okay, that's the sign, that's the tree.
Okay, you got it. Take care.
Yeah, here we are. This is one I put together, and this is something they do in math classes and spend a great deal of time on. That's a quadratic, and that's another quadratic, and there's another one. Now, there are 3 major parameters that are changing in here. One of them is how high is it going to be, or at least how high is its lowest point going to be. Note that it goes on to infinity up above, but how high is its lowest point going to be? Where is it going to be to the left and to the right? And how narrow is it going to be? And those 3 functions are really, they spend an enormous amount of time on those in pre-calc classes so that it can get a concept of how you change those parameters. I'll show you very quickly what they are. Okay, here we are. Let me just show you how this I'm not going to worry about how the program runs. Let's just look at the functions themselves. These are all the same essentially, and they have the three different parameters. The amplitude is how sharp that curve is going to be. Was it going to be sharp or not sharp? And so that's what the amplitude is all about. The height, this tells you where its bottom is going to be. In this case, it's 0, which means it's going to come right down to the X line and go on. If I made it negative, it would go below the line. If I made it a positive number, it would go above the line. And then the K is how far to the right or left. Well, as you can see, this first one simply goes straight down to the line, and it's right centered down the middle because both the H and the K are 0. And let's look at the function itself and see what those are. Oh, okay, the function's right here. Okay, if you multiply by something rather, that's what makes it a sharp curve. If you subtract K from the thing that you are multiplying, in this case, raising to the power 2, that slides the whole thing right and left, because you're saying that x minus 2 does all of this. It means that when x is over here, it happens instead of over here. And so we slide it around that way. And then when I add something to it at the end, that pushes it up or down. So let's just take this function 1 here, and let's just do a little something to it. This one came all the way down to the line and centered around the K. Let's make it go a little further down than the line. Let's make it negative 1.5. Does that sound good?
All right.
And then the K is how far to the right or left. Well, let's move it over a little bit to the left, because all the others were moved to the right. And so let's make it negative 2 and see what we end up getting out of that. Okay, now have I made any mistakes in it? Have I mistyped anything? No idea. Save. Okay, I'm just going to draw the other one too there, I think, yeah. And the third one, yeah. Okay, so you see what that one did was it brought it down 2 and 1 over to the left. And that's what we've got. I know that doesn't look like an awful lot, and it's not terribly impressive, but from a mathematical standpoint, it's awfully useful to have a tool like this to play around with that kind of thing.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
I wonder if we're going to have a class at all.
I don't know.
We'll just have to see. Anyway, I'm glad you stuck around and got a chance to play with a few things there. Python, I've taught 5 or 6 different languages at various times, computer languages. And I really like Python because it's easy. It's easy to learn, but it's extremely powerful. It'll do an awful lot of things at the same time. So it's a wonderful discovery, and there's so many things you can do with it. This is a very different kind of graphing than I've done before, because we're actually using Turtle, that little arrow thing there to draw the plots on the screen. And there are various different ways you can do that. Now, I'll show you how all of that works at some point if you're interested. But that'll take a little longer to get up and going.
All right.
So for you, basically, see if you can't get the program running. And on your machine, grab those little example programs that I put up there and stick them up. Then if you feel brave, go ahead and start twiddling around with them and see what happens. They may just fall apart completely, but you can always download them again if you mess them up.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week. Okay, bringing class to an end.